From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome to U.S. Farm Report for our season opener. It's the kickoff of our 2024 U.S. Farm Report Beck's College Roadshow, and here's what's in store over the next 60 minutes. A far-out idea.
So one of the things we are looking at is how do we grow food in space?
That could be closer than you think, how these researchers could be unlocking a new universe for growing food, taking tech to a new level.
This is one way we can really accelerate this technology and tool development and make sure it's helping farmers out in the real world.
How in-farms will be the bedrock for the farm of the future, helping feedlots find ways to better conserve nutrients.
The focus of that in everybody's mind is normally carbon and greenhouse gases. Actually, much of our focus here will be that, but also nitrogen management.
It's a first-of-its-kind Feedlot Innovation Center right here in Nebraska. Plus, could we see USDA make adjustments to yield in their next report? We'll have all of that as we kick off College Roadshow.
The 2024 U.S. Farm Report College Roadshow from the University of Nebraska is brought to you exclusively by Beck's. From farmers' first pass in the field to the final one at harvest, it's a game plan rooted in faith and belief. Beck's Hybrids is with you every turn because both on and off the field, we're all farmers at heart. See why at beckshybrids.com.
Now for the news, how much are lower crop prices weighing on the overall net farm income picture? USDA this week releasing an updated 2024 financial forecast. But the agency releasing a bit of a surprise, now forecasting net farm income at $140 billion this year. That is a drop of $6.5 billion or 4.4% compared to 2023, but it marks a $24 billion increase over what it forecasted in February. Net cash farm income is forecast to drop by $12 billion or more than 7% to $154.1 billion this year.
The result is that net farm income is forecast to decline $6.5 billion nominally. Overall, cash receipts are forecast to fall in 2024, and they are the largest source of income to the sector and often drive the trends that we see in net income. Corn receipts are forecast to decline 22% or about $18 billion, inflation adjusted, and soybean receipts are forecast to decline 17% or about $10 billion.
USDA is expecting higher cash receipts when it comes to total animal and animal produce receipts, along with higher receipts for eggs, cattle, milk, and broilers relative to last year. It also says total production expenses are forecast to drop by 1%, with feed, fertilizer, and pesticide expenses expected to see the largest declines. Well, it's widely expected the Federal Reserve will order a rate cut when it meets 2 weeks from now. But looming on the horizon is also the possibility of a government shutdown. Legislators returning to Capitol Hill next week, they'll have just 13 days to agree on a path forward before the current federal budget runs out on September 30th, risking a possible pause in critical government services for millions of Americans. We asked Marcia Bunger, the administrator of the Risk Management Agency, about the possible impact a shutdown could have on things such as crop insurance and risk management tools for producers.
You know, it doesn't mean the end of crop insurance if we do have a government shutdown. It does mean, though, we have to reduce staff considerably, and we only maintain the basics. We probably have 30 to 60 days after a shutdown to continue helping process insurance providers' claim payments.
Now, there are reports there is bipartisan support for a continuing resolution, which would keep the government funded beyond the November elections. But it's reported some Republicans in the House and Senate are pushing for a stopgap bill that would push a funding deadline into next year. Well, economic pressures on the farm right now continuing to weigh on farmers' minds, with the latest ag economy barometer taking a nosedive in August. The survey of farmer sentiment from Purdue University and the CME Group fell 13 points from July, coming in at a reading of 100. Survey takers say weakening farm income prospects weighed on farmer sentiment.
When we asked producers about their biggest concerns for the upcoming year, they continue to point to high input costs as their top concern.
The August Farm Financial Performance Index fell 9 points below a month earlier and is now 14 points lower than a year ago. In fact, surveyors say this month's reading was the weakest response since July of 2020, when COVID-related lockdowns dominated the headlines. Well, avian flu has arrived at the top dairy producing state in the country. California authorities reporting cows at 3 dairy farms in the state have tested positive for H5N1. The infected herds are in California's Central Valley region. The state ag department says the infected dairies are now under quarantine. That means the H5N1 outbreak in dairy cattle has now spread to 14 states. USDA reporting almost 200 have been infected since March, along with 12 dairy and poultry farm workers. However, California officials say no human HPAI cases have been confirmed in relation to the latest infections, and they continue to say the nation's dairy supply is safe. All right, that's it for news. Well, farmers here in Nebraska dealt with too much rain in the spring, but now dryness is starting to creep into the picture. We'll have a check of your forecast coming up next.
U.S. Farm Report weather is brought to you by H&S Manufacturing. Maximize baleage yield with less time and effort with the LW1100 line wrap bale wrapper. You can wrap round or square bales, and the automatic operating mode allows for a one-person operation.
Well, here in the High Plains, there are drought concerns this fall, especially just south of us in Kansas, where some producers are having to haul in water for their cattle. Matt Engelbrecht joining us now with an updated look at the drought monitor. Matt, what are the biggest concerns?
Hope you're enjoying your weekend. Looking out next week, drought monitor again, pretty extreme in terms of the drought. And in fact, in some places, not only extreme, but exceptional. A few pockets, some very dry conditions coming up into Ohio and West Virginia, but also into Oklahoma and Texas as well. What is noticeably different this week than last week and the week before, the amount of yellow now encompassing the United States. Now, the yellow isn't officially a drought, but it is dry, and it doesn't really take much. Based on where we're going with the overall pattern, I expect the yellow to hang around, possibly get worse, rather than the situation alleviate itself anytime soon. One of the reasons for that is we're returning to a pattern that's going to kind of bottle all the moisture up, bottle all the energy up back on the West Coast. Now, this is a jet stream for the rest of this week, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. You can see this upper level low, which traditionally would provide some widespread rain in and across the United States. Isn't going to do that. That's going to be moving off to the north and to the northeast. In its wake, a ridge of high pressure starts to develop, and there it is. Not a lot of up and down motion with the jet stream. That means things are going to stay rather consistent day after day after day, which is going to allow things to stay dry, drier, driest, and then of course warm, warmer, and warmest over the course of about 3 to 4 days. So again, there's a jet stream on Tuesday. As you get into Wednesday and Thursday, not much going on with the ridge of high pressure. In fact, it amplifies back up here towards the Canadian-United States border. And as I mentioned, back out here on the West Coast, there's the trough. So again, cooler than average conditions and also a lot of rain on the West Coast, but the energy is going to have to work up and over that ridge of high pressure rather than go through it. So what that means, drier than average conditions between the 10th and the 14th. And you can see on the temperature outlook, we're expecting above normal temperatures for a large portion of the United States. Where we do see some substantial rainfall, the Gulf Coast states, that's where temperatures are going to be a little bit cooler.
Thanks, Matt. Well, USDA will release its first survey-based yield estimates next week. But what are the most critical factors to watch for corn and soybeans in the next 60 days? University of Nebraska's Brad Lubin and Jeff Peterson, plus Nebraska alum Doug Simon, join me for a marketing discussion that happens right here from the University of Nebraska next. Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report this weekend. We have some great research that we're going to showcase coming up here for our College Roadshow. But first, we're going to showcase some of this ag econ knowledge here at the university. We have Brad Lubin, Jeff Peterson, as well as Doug Simon joining us to break down the markets. And there's a lot of frustration out there, but we have seen some life in the markets lately. But Jeff, let's first talk about this heat. I mean, we have seen the heat come in. We've seen some dry pockets really start to show up here in August. Do you think this soybean crop is getting smaller?
Yeah, I think overall the crop is getting smaller. You know, the Pro Farmer Tour showed that we had a really good potential. Pod counts were really high, and it looks like that crop had a lot of potential. Part of the challenge we've had, though, is we've had these warmer and drier conditions. The thing I'd caution everybody on, though, is that just because this crop is getting smaller doesn't necessarily mean it's getting smaller below USDA's numbers. So if we think about that 53.2 yield, I still think we probably could see a chance to see it a little bit higher than that number yet, but even though the crop is probably backing up a little bit, Tyne.
Yeah, and we're going to get an updated look at that from USDA next week, their first field-based survey that they will release in the September WASDE. But Doug, there is some early harvest happening in some areas. What are you hearing as far as reports go?
Well, the early ones that got started, I've heard, they planted early and they got it in before it was wet, and so they should have pretty good yields. They're not really talking a lot about the yields. And there's other areas, like we were talking before the show, that are dry and have started to chop or have started to harvest because they have dried down. But you use a good description. Pockets are moistures. There have been areas where we've had decent rains. Further out west, actually, their dry land, non-irrigated yields are probably going to be a little better than they thought 2 weeks ago. But I would say in the eastern part of the state here, probably down from where we were 6 weeks ago. I think we had really big opportunity or big potential, but we've lost that with the drier weather.
I mean, how much do you think, percentage-wise? How much have we taken off, possibly? I mean, I know the verdict, it'll take a while to figure this out, but if you had to guess right now?
In Cass County, we're probably looking at 250, dry land yields in areas, and they're probably back more toward APH, maybe 200, 210.
Okay. So a considerable hit.
Correct, yes.
Well, Brad, you go just south of here in areas of Kansas. I mean, it's ugly as far as the drought picture goes. And when you look at some of this disaster aid, in the past we've seen Congress be able to pass some of this ad hoc. Do you expect Congress to be able to come to terms to be able to get some of this drought assistance to producers across the country that may need it this year?
Right. I think we continually see pressure for drought assistance. Recognize that in the Farm Bill language itself, we have permanent standing authority for assistance on the livestock side, but not the crop side. It's always a debate in Congress. It's always a challenge to say how much assistance might be available if we have some dry pockets. When the overall ag economy is struggling a bit as it is, when certain pockets are struggling with production conditions, there's more of a political push to get assistance. But it's still a fight, and it's still difficult to imagine when that would get done.
Jeff, as farmers start to get in the field, and they're weighing right now, what do? Are we going to see more farmers store the grain this fall, and what potentially will that do to basis?
Yeah, so a couple things there. I think overall coming in here, unfortunately, I'd say the farmers are undersold. They just didn't see the opportunity to make the sale, so as they bring these bushels into town, they're going to do everything they can to go ahead and keep from selling. So they're going to try to put stuff on storage or delayed pricing. They're going to try to use some bags out in the fields to try to go ahead and hold that crop. And overall, I think the commercial grain buyers are going to have to really work hard to get ownership. So I think we're going to see some improvement in basis as we go forward here. Now, at a certain point, we got to think about the Eastern Corn Belt. That could be hurt a little bit because of some of the things that are going on the Mississippi River. We'll have to talk about that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that too. So as farmers, Doug, then weigh their options right now. Last year, for those that didn't sell off the combine, I think they wish they would have. What do you think is the best move for farmers this fall?
The other thing you have to look at is the carry in the market. We had big carries last year. That D's to March corn carry was 25 cents, which was a record. Now we're out in that 18 to 19 cents, which was about the same as what there's only been one other time we were that large. So there are some big carries in both the corn and the beans. But the other thing you have to weigh that against is 8, 9, 10% operating notes. If you're going to store that, are you going to get the return if you could have just sold that, off the combine? Where we look at trying to hedge, ahead of time, doing pre-harvest marketing, and if you got hedges on, you can roll those out and capture that carry out there, but you've got to be acutely aware of what it's costing you to just put it into the bin or put it into an elevator and look at that being unhedged or unprotected, and what the cost of that's going to be, and the actual cost of the farmer's carry. They're giving you incentive in the market, but you also have to look at that cost of interest, what you're going to forego.
Well, is it too early to start talking about the heat and dryness in Brazil? Plus, what are the chances that we'll actually see a farm bill pass this year? We're going to talk about all of that. But first, we need to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with more U.S. Farm Report. Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report, our marketing discussion from right here at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. All right, Brad, Farm Bill. What are the chances we actually see a farm bill pass this year?
I think the chances, unfortunately, are pretty slim. There's only one person seemingly optimistic about getting the farm bill done, and that's Chairman Glenn Thompson, who did, in fact, get the farm bill through the House Ag Committee. Nobody else has really shown a pathway that says we're going to get to the finish line. We're probably talking about a debate in the lame duck session of Congress after the election that says, let's just get an extension, let's get something done, let's push this debate into the new year with a new Congress and probably a new start to the debate.
Jeff, I mean, as we're watching no farm bill in place and the net farm income picture change pretty quickly on the row crop side, what are some critical factors that farmers really need to watch over the next 60 days?
Yeah, so the things I think they really need to focus on here is we really got to watch this weather and what that ends up meaning for our ending yield, because depending on where that ending yield comes in is going to depend a lot on where this futures market goes, whether we're going to be able to move this market higher here or not. The other thing we want to watch really close is what's going on with also the Mississippi River. And that's going to come into play because that can impact basically the cost of freight that we have, and that can impact our competitiveness on the export side. So we're going to have to watch our exports. There's been a lot of talk about new crop exports for corn and soybeans. We're going to have to watch that. Got to keep a very close eye on South America, what's going on down there and the conditions that's down there. In addition, we want to watch Ukraine. Ukraine's been very dry. And currently, I think the production estimates that USDA has out there right now, we probably need to bring those back a little bit. So we need to keep a close eye on that. Not to mention what ends up happening with their ability to export any of the crop out of Ukraine out through those ports. So those are some of the major things right now, Tyne, we need to keep an eye on.
Yeah, Jeff, you mentioned South America. Doug, is it too early to talk about the heat and the dryness that we're seeing in South America, specifically Brazil?
Their monsoonal rains typically come in more in October, so we're still a month out, but it is definitely dry. But the La Nina pattern that we haven't fully progressed into that type of pattern, but that does leave them in more risk for more dryness. So that'll be something we're gonna have to watch. But to say it today, the models don't go far enough out. I mean, if it's European models or GFS models, and now they're using AI models, but there's a lot of look at those big picture patterns, and it's definitely a risk, but it could change pretty quick.
Yes.
Like it did last year.
Exactly, and
Yes.
that's what we were reminded of every year. Well, Brad,
Right.
I mean, we talked a lot about the Farm Bill, but is that the biggest policy issue right now that farmers need to be
Right.
watching in Washington?
You know, if we talk about the risks that farmers face, the Farm Bill actually might be far down on the list.
Really?
Even if we have just a Farm Bill extension, we still have a safety net, and we still have a safety net that adjusts for the coming year. But there are other issues on the horizon, from trade to taxes to regulations to bioenergy, labor, other issues that maybe have bigger fights ahead in Congress, maybe dependent upon the fate of the election and who controls the White House, who controls Congress. But fundamentally, those things might have bigger impacts on agriculture over the next several years than just a Farm Bill debate itself.
Brad, Doug, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us for a discussion here at the University of Nebraska. All right, we need to take a quick break, and then we'll have much more right here on U.S. Farm Report.
A treat for you this week on Tractor Tales, folks. Carrie Jo is going to show off her Farmall Super C that she drove when she was younger working on the dairy farm.
This tractor is a 1953 Super C Farmall. My great-grandmother purchased this new in '53. She had a great big farm, and most of the family lived out there within a few distances of her house, real close by, all of it connected. And so when I was about 13, I started driving this tractor in the hayfield, sometimes mowed, but most of the time I drove the hay rake, had the hay rake with me. So I've been driving this tractor a long time. I hated it because I was the only girl in the hayfield, but that was my job. So that's what we did. And then through the years, my great uncle inherited it from his mother, my great grandmother. They were going to get rid of the farm. My cousins were, my great cousins. And so I asked what they were doing with the tractor, and they said, well, we're just going to sell it. We're just going to sell it all off. So we bought the tractor, actually. And at that point, it was not in real good shape. She kept it my great grandmother kept it in the always in the barn, but they had not. So it wasn't in real good shape, but we got it, and my husband restores tractors for other people. So he restored it, and since then I've been driving it in parades and doing displays and just doing all kinds of things with it since then. And now all the cousins are envious because I have the old tractor. It brings back all the good thoughts from having a big extended family like that and being on the farm and driving the tractor and being a part of it. So I've really enjoyed it. And when we got it, I was so excited when we got it, and Charles got it all, my husband Charles got it all back together and got it where, and we've hauled it all over the United States to tractor shows for me to display. And so I just enjoy having it and being the envy of the cousins now.
Thanks, Greg. Well, when we come back, it's the farm of the future. And it's not just looking at the latest technology in crops, but also unlocking answers for cattle producers across the country. Our 2024 College Roadshow continues from right here in Nebraska after the break.
You're watching U.S. Farm Report. Trusted, timely, tradition. The 2024 U.S. Farm Report College Roadshow from the University of Nebraska is brought to you exclusively by Beck's. From farmers' first pass in the field to the final one at harvest, it's a game plan rooted in faith and belief. Beck's Hybrids is with you every turn because both on and off the field, we're all farmers at heart. See why at beckshybrids.com.
What does the farm of the future look like? Well, University of Nebraska will soon give you a glimpse. And as we show you this weekend, InFarms will be a test bed for new technologies while also helping farmers better harness data. What looks like a blank canvas today will soon be Nebraska's farm of the future.
What we're trying to do here is really create a space where faculty, staff, students, external partners can come and work with us more closely here.
Located 40 miles northeast of the University of Nebraska's campus is InFarms, which stands for Nebraska Future Ag Research and Management Systems.
Obviously, this is our biggest farm operation in the area, so that's what we really wanted to do, was create a space where people could walk right outside, robots could go right outside, and then work right in the field, production system that we have here.
With 3,000 acres of crops situated around this farm, along with the 5,000 head feedlot operation just across the road, it's a working farm that's developing and testing tools while also capturing high-quality data. Luck says one of the main focuses is on nitrogen application, a critical issue for Nebraska farmers.
We're able to use these data that we collect from these systems to monitor the crop stress through the year and respond to when it's needed and not use all of our nitrogen at the beginning of the year. And we've already shown significant savings doing that.
At the start of the growing season, Nebraska farm fields were walloped with rain, and it left farmers wondering if they lost too much nitrogen, worried about their crops being stressed later in the year. That's when these researchers got to work.
One of our research staff, Emily, that pilots our drone, does a lot of data analysis. We were actually to go in and put in plots and monitor those plots during the year and basically tell the farm team, this corn in this area is still not stressed. You still don't need that application. And essentially we were able to steer them away from that. And we, potentially save thousands of dollars this year just by having that data to share with them.
So this sensor has 6 cameras on it.
Emily Hansen is a research tech here who used this drone as a tool to measure the nitrogen loss.
So for example, when we're looking at nitrogen stress, we're mostly looking at the normalized difference of red edge, or NDRE, as our indice.
From 400 feet, she captures images at a 5-centimeter resolution.
So at 400 feet, I end up with a lot of pictures from this camera that I stitch together to get a look at the entire field. On one of the research fields that I'm flying weekly, I get about 300 to 400 pictures that I'm stitching together, and that's from each band.
That's just one of the many tools being used at this research test bed, a site that Nathan Thorson, the research manager at InFarms, will office out of every day.
Even for industry to come out and implement their technology onto a piece of equipment before it goes out into testing, there really was not a specialized location dedicated to that operation. And so we feel that that's going to be very vital for our partnerships moving forward.
Thorson's expertise is in data collection and analysis.
I think one of the biggest gripes right now is we've been collecting data on a producer level for a large number of years. And a lot of producers are asking, what can we do with this data now? And so from our perspective, we want to be able to take this data and formulate decision results for these producers, actionable results that they can take, implement on their farms and better their operations overall.
With a wireless internet system that covers 10,000 acres here, their high-speed wireless network could also help unlock what's next.
With that, we're able to utilize 150 megabyte upload download speeds, which to me is very, very exciting, because that'll allow us to not only pursue a connected farm aspect, but also venture into field edge computing, IoT sensors, IoT devices that are out here in the fields for our agronomic data.
Knowing data analysis is often the biggest barrier for farmers. InFarms is working to automate that into a dashboard.
They have questions that we can answer faster, like this nitrogen, management issue. They'll be able to, simply go into the dashboard, query what they want, and get those results much faster than us having to go in and process it manually. The data's there, we can automate those analyses and then send that decision for the farm manager to review quickly.
From the public sector to private investments, this soil will be the bedrock for harvesting answers that matter most to farmers here. Well, as you heard, it's not just crops, also cattle. And we'll head just down the road from InFarms to check out a new Feedlot Innovation Center that's unlike anything you've ever seen. But first, we'll have a glimpse of ag around the globe next. Now for a glimpse of ag around the world, something that could help dairy producers here at home. The U.S. Trade Representative's office announcing an agreement with Chile over commonly named cheeses and meat products. Ambassador Catherine Tai saying the deal will ensure U.S. producers of meats and cheeses will not be excluded from the Chilean market. Adding the agreement gives U.S. producers the opportunity to grow their businesses and to supply Chilean consumers with specialty cheeses and meats using certain terms, including Parmesan, feta, cheddar, Gouda, provolone, and salami. Milk organizations calling it a landmark agreement, saying this safeguards the rights of U.S. cheese and meat producers to use certain common names and that they will have the right to continue to use these terms in Chile. The organization's urging the administration to continue efforts to push back against what it sees as the European Union's strategic monopolization of common names. Ukraine's grain exports have now surpassed last year's figures. It's reported total grain exports reached 7.2 million metric tons this year. That's a significant increase from just under 5 million tons this time last year. That includes almost 4 million metric tons of wheat. However, the Ukrainian government has agreed with traders and ag associations to limit wheat exports this year to just over 16 million metric tons. The cap is part of an annual memorandum where officials promise to maintain existing trade terms and not restrict exports within the agreed volume, while traders commit to not exceeding this volume. The European Union remains a major destination for Ukrainian grains. Well, that's a glimpse of ag around the world. Stay with us because up next, we have Chip's Corner.
Chip's Corner on U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by Research. Maximize your valuable fertilizer investment with Research, an exclusive low-dust humic granule from Helena.
Welcome back to our College Roadshow this weekend. We're checking in now with Chip Flory for Chip's Corner. Chip, what good stuff do you have for us this week?
Yeah, that's right, Tyne. Every now and then, the futures markets will show us what really matters at any given time. Okay, sometimes it's crop size, and we're working with issues on the supply side of the balance sheets. Sometimes it's exports, and we're more focused on issues on the demand side of the balance sheet. But many times, it's about money flow or investment management, and that means that seems to be the case in the grain markets right now. That's where the really important price influence is coming from. Now, when interest rates were on the way up, money flowed out of the commodity world, and that includes corn futures, soybean futures, wheat futures, and that's because money managers were chasing higher and higher returns from the interest rate sensitive markets, like equities. But now things are changing. I'm not saying that interest rates are going to head straight back to zero, but a move lower certainly seems to be in the cards. Now, I talked with Jim Emter from the Van On Company about that earlier this week and about how the transition for the Federal Reserve might impact commodity prices.
And as soon as Powell hinted out of that Jackson Hole meeting that there was a pivot or posture coming here potentially in September, if all the numbers aligned, that they could be a driver for reducing interest rate, maybe not just 1, maybe even 2 and 3 for the year. Chip, that changed the whole attitude, that gave us hope off this base bottom. And I think this is what systemically has changed the productivity for this rally and given us at least an opportunity for the bull to stand up and have their Christmas moments here for at least a temporary moment.
Yeah, so we were having a little bit of fun there with Christmas coming early for the commodity bulls there. But the point is this. Now that interest rates have topped and are likely headed lower, the interest rate sensitive investments are going to be less and less attractive to the money managers out there as they look for options on how to reinvest that money. They're looking over at the grain markets, and what they're seeing is a market that is cheap, that's priced relatively cheap right now. It's got more upside potential than it does downside risks. So that's the type of investment that they're looking for. And that's why corn, soybeans, wheat prices can post some price gains ahead of what's expected to be a really big harvest this fall.
Thanks, Chip. And don't forget, you can catch him live twice a day, 10 a.m. for AgriTalk AM and 2 p.m. for AgriTalk PM. All right, when we come back, it is unlike anything you've ever seen. A Feedlot Innovation Center that will provide answers to cattle producers, not just here in Nebraska, but across the country. We'll show you that research next. The new Klosterman Feedlot Innovation Center is almost finished here at the University of Nebraska. We first introduced you to the concept last year, but now the idea is nearing reality, paving the way for world-class research projects, and it's all being done to help unlock necessary answers to help producers. Walk into this Feedlot Innovation Center, and it's unlike anything you've ever seen.
We thought this is the latest and greatest way for us to help the feedlot industry, help the beef industry focus on performance, environmental issues and challenges that we can address, animal welfare and behavior, as well as precision technology.
It's all being done here, the new Klosterman Feedlot Innovation Center, a $7.2 million project that sprouted from an idea 4 years ago.
We want to be a test bed for all of the latest innovations, not only that we would like to develop internally, but we also want to be a test bed for companies. So if there's industry innovations that companies are developing, many of them need to be tested in the real world. And yet, when you test them in the real world, you want to be able to collect all the data and information on how well do they work. That's the role that we think we serve.
Galen Erickson, who's also the Feedlot Extension Specialist for the University of Nebraska, is standing in the middle of the Klopfenstein Feed Technology Center, one of 4 buildings that now called the Feedlot Innovation Center home.
It's a 240-head individual feeding facility. It's a facility we're using for individual animal management research. There's a lot of interest in what can we do with precision technology to improve beef cattle production, and we have a lot of research planned for this facility in coming years.
The Klopfenstein Feed Technology Center has 36 commercial-sized pens, which will house 60 head across 4 different housing systems.
Really the goal is to do individual management, individual precision technology, look at sensors we can use on cattle, as well as just ways to enhance either welfare, health, performance.
One of the key questions Erickson says they'll uncover here is how to improve nutrient loss from feed yard systems.
We need to do a better job of conserving nutrients. The focus of that in everybody's mind is normally carbon and greenhouse gases. Actually, much of our focus here will be that, but also nitrogen management. So housing systems is one of the greatest ways to change that.
Erickson says bottom line is traditional open lots, which is the most common feed yard housing system today, isn't great at conserving nitrogen. So by placing cattle in these deep pit barns, it's a great way to conserve nitrogen while also revealing other essential answers.
Well, if you put them in these barns, you get to control the elements some. So in the summertime, there's less heat stress, wintertime, less cold stress, but they're also crowded in pretty good. And so we're looking at how do the cattle perform and behave in those systems? How can we manage nutrients in those systems compared to traditional open lots?
While researchers will find answers for feedlots in the U.S., other studies ongoing here at the University of Nebraska are finding answers that could be valuable worldwide.
There's a lot of global concern about how much cattle are actually contributing to global warming, and so we're trying to answer that question and get involved with actually quantifying those emissions, because there's not a lot of research out there that actually tells us what the cattle are emitting. It's a lot of predictions or estimates.
Rebecca McDermott's PhD work is in beef cattle nutrition and quantifying greenhouse gas emissions of cattle grazing pasture. Her classroom, well, it's this, a 27-acre brome grass pasture where you'll find cattle grazing with GPS collars. The research is 5 years in the works, and McDermott says they're already finding impactful insight, including what role the weather plays.
When there's drought, there's less biomass or less forage on the field, and so that pasture is actually taking up less carbon. So then the cattle are carbon positive, meaning that they're contributing carbon to the environment, whereas in years where there's lots of rainfall, lots of forage, lots of biomass, then the pasture is actually taking up more carbon than what the cattle are emitting, so then that system is actually would be carbon neutral.
From tracking cattle in the pasture to now being able to track cattle's feed consumption with individual ID tags in this feeding system, this research could shape the cattle industry in the years ahead.
When that tag is scanned by this reader, we've decided, does the animal have access to this bunk, or does the animal have access to this bunk next to it? And we'll have different diets in these bunks that we can compare. So once that animal's ID is read, we've allowed it to either have access or not, and for how long.
The Feedlot Innovation Center is tracking and measuring efficiency at every stage, ending with this finishing facility here. Between the Feed Technology Center, the two confinement barns in the middle, and the processing facility on the end, this state-of-the-art Feedlot Innovation Center is truly one of a kind.
I always joke, cattle can't lie. So when we do our randomizations correctly, whatever the cattle perform in these two different systems, that's what the two systems tell us, because the cattle can't fool you. I think we'll have real-world application and things that producers can adopt tomorrow.
The team says the new Feedlot Innovation Center should be stocked with cattle in the coming weeks. It's an exciting time here at the university. All right, up next, agriculture in space. It may seem out of this world, but thanks to research here in Lincoln, it's closer than you think. That story is next. A team of Husker researchers have a goal to launch the first Center for Agriculture in space. The premise? Well, it's simple. Whether it's Mars or the moon, if people will be there, they'll have to eat. And so researchers here are exploring ag out of this world. A far-out idea with one burning question at its core.
So one of the things we are looking at is how do we grow food in space?
This team's goal, to grow the first acre of corn on Mars's soil. It may seem like it's worlds away, but for the work in this lab, it could revolutionize the future of agriculture. Santosh Pitla has already cracked the ag engineering code on creating autonomous vehicles that can serve multiple purposes, just like he did with this, Flex Row.
When I say multi-purpose, our goal was to do planting and then spraying, nitrogen application, and then we are looking at targeted weeding as well.
But it's those creations that could level up what they're trying to accomplish in space, revealing answers on Earth that will then be transplanted in space.
On Earth, yes, we understand irrigation, but in the space when there is zero gravity, so how does irrigation work?
What started 5 years ago with Flex Row is just starting to scratch the surface on what may be possible.
In space, the environment is toxic, so it takes a lot of effort for a person to go out and scout for resources. We can send these robots out, like NASA have many rovers, right? Specifically aimed at, looking for water and looking for other things. But what we can be looking at is what sort of resources can we reclaim to support agriculture.
One of the ways to unlock answers is with this, a small-scale version of a greenhouse that could be used to grow food in space.
For having some agriculture in extreme environment or airspace, we need to provide an environment for plants so that they can grow in that condition. We have to provide that condition for them.
So the team decided a controlled environment with indoor agriculture makes the most sense, with sensors that can monitor the plant's needs and manage those resources.
When there is no light for example, on the surface of Moon or Mars, it is dark, we can provide the light with LED. And with photo resistor, we can monitor the light.
exploring what's possible with leafy plants, agriculture, and space, maybe closer than you think.
I believe someday we can have some perfect platform for putting in the surface on Moon and Mars to provide food for crew members without making them busy, so they can focus on their own task, and we will provide food for them.
One small step for researchers here that could truly be a giant leap for mankind. It's these tools that could create a new galaxy of possibilities. He's right. That research is out of this world. And I'm sure the two astronauts currently stuck in space wishes this research was even further along, able to have access to fresh foods like lettuce. Well, that does it for our first College Roadshow of the season. Thanks to Bex for partnering with us again this year. Next week, tune into Ag Day. We'll be visiting Purdue for the Roadshow. Then the following week, we'll be at Iowa State University digging into research there. For all of us at U.S. Farm Report, thanks for watching, and tune in next week as we work to build on our tradition. Have a great weekend, everyone.
U.S. Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast.